Next up is a new series to air, one by the name of Before You, a series that takes a look into accidents and disasters that have occurred and how they occurred. After that, we will be signing off for tonight. This is GSNZ. Tonight with Before You, our first episode speaks of France's worst rail disaster at Gare De Lyon.
Paris, France, June of 1988. It's summer in France. And for the rail system, that means a new timetable, leaving many passengers in the dust. An outbound train packed with passengers shall head to Melun for a usual transit service. At least, it should have. Instead, on this day, one of the most detrimental and gruesome attacks to take place on the French rail network occurs. This is the Gare De Lyon rail disaster. June 27th, 1988. Gare de Lyon, Paris, France. In the French capital, the summertime has arrived, and thus a new timetable, introducing new stops and throwing out old ones, leaving many at stations having missed their trains. But everything still runs as smooth as it can, with trains speeding down every inch of track. For many years on end, France has made major advancements in their rail technology, one of, if not the most notable, being the TGV. Introduced in 1981, it was one of the most impressive rail advancements since Japan built their Shinkansen bullet train in the 1960s. So, France has made quite the reputation when it came to rail networks, and especially its safety record. Back in 1988, a commuter train is making its journey from Melun to Paris on a regular trip. The driver of the commuter train, number 944, is Mr. Daniel Saloon, with his guard, Charles Beauvais, operating a 1965 Z5300 commuter train. Everything has gone quite smooth, nothing out of the ordinary for the passengers or the staff. Well, that would be, until the train reaches Les Verts des Maisons, a stop on the old timetable that was cut likely due to low usage. At 18:36 or 6:36 p.m., seeing the station and not sensing the train coming to a stop, an anonymous passenger pulls on the emergency brake. Mr. Beauvais comes to see who it was, but the mysterious individual slips away before he can see who it was. Following protocol, Daniel calls in the situation to the control room to alert them of the disturbance, and thus Daniel and Charles go to reset the brakes. It's a situation the two are familiar with, and one that should take no more than a few minutes. However, on this occasion, it takes quite a long while. In fact, much longer, due to an excessive amount of pressure. But, nevertheless, the train sets off again, running over half an hour late, leaving only at 7:07 p.m. As he calls in the situation again, he is told to skip the next station and make a beeline towards Gare de Lyon instead of going by the normal schedule. It's a shame that Daniel could not foresee the events ahead, but we'll get right back to that after this commercial break. If you're currently enjoying this episode of Before You, we would appreciate your support greatly by hitting the subscribe button and bell notification. By doing so, you can be alerted as to when new episodes are broadcasted. And for those of you who have already done so, we thank you ever so much. Now, let's get back to Mr. Saloon. Daniel Saloon is currently running late after an unknown passenger pulled the emergency brake, and he and Charles Beauvais supposedly fixed the situation. However, At this point, another person should be introduced into the equation. Mr. Andre Tanguy, driver of outbound train 951. He is doing the same service as Daniels. However, his train awakes due to the lack of a guard on board, so many passengers pile into the train. Keep Mr. Tanguy in mind, as we'll come back to him later. For now though, let's go back to Daniel. Going at around 95 kilometers per hour, or around 60 miles per hour, Daniel approaches Gare De Lyon, along with a yellow signal telling him to slow down for the steep grade into the basement. He goes for the brake, and barely anything. He's only able to reduce his speed down to 45 kilometers per hour, or 28 miles per hour. Nowhere near enough to de-escalate the situation. 1909, 7:09 p.m. Daniel calls into the control.
Stop everything, I've got no brakes. Stop everything, I've got no brakes.
He runs to rush everyone to the back of the train, while Mr. Beauvais runs to find another brake. But before doing so, Daniel pushes the radio alarm, sending a signal to the control room to stop all trains within the vicinity. As Daniel's train hurtles its way down into the basement of Gare De Lyon, Mr. Andre Tanguy is told via station intercom that the train is coming directly towards him. As he picks up the train's radio, Andre sees Daniel's train, but bravely tells everyone to evacuate the train, until the moment of his now inevitable death. Within seconds, the trains become a tangled mess of metal, and a big cloud of smoke engulfs the two. Andre Tanguy has no chance of survival, and is killed upon impact. But most people aren't so lucky, and are still alive under the rubble and carnage of the two trains. Nobody on Saloon's train is injured in the impact. Fire and rescue crews arrive 11 minutes after impact, but due to the mangled mess of the trains, medical personnel must wait until the fire crews have broken through the metal. With over 100 people estimated to be in the destroyed train, it's a long night for the rescue crew. A surgeon who was brought on, and who also saw fighting in Chad's civil war, said that it was nothing like surgery in wartime. It was worse than surgery in wartime. As the search goes on, it becomes hopeless, bit by bit, and soon, only lifeless bodies are recovered. 56 bodies are found, and 57 people are injured, bringing the casualties to 113 in total. After the rescue operation was concluded, the investigation was on as to how in the world a tragedy like this could have happened to one of the safest rail networks on the planet. Nothing is off the table, and one of the first things investigators look for is the signs of arson or an attack of some sorts. The one thing they know for sure is that the brakes failed after the stop at Le Verste Maison after an emergency brake was pulled. As investigators scrutinize the train for faults, they realize that a brake valve to provide air to the train's brakes is intentionally closed when it should be fully open. Could it be the result of sabotage, they think? Investigators come to understand that most of the train receives air through the pipe, and because of the pipe valve being shut off, they come to the conclusion that there was indeed external forces at play. Interviews are conducted with Charles Beauvais and Daniel Saloon. It was reported from the interviews that the valve that was closed was actually used as a grip when trying to pull the actual handle to reset the brakes. So, that explains that. But hang on. If the brakes were stuck in the on position, how could the train get going again? A look over the interview finds Saloon claiming that he believed a common issue was at play. Saloon suspected that too much pressure was put into the system, as opposed to too little. What should have happened is that Daniel radioed in to ask for a crew of maintenance workers to help the situation. What instead happened is that he and Charles would go to each individual car of the train, and bleed the air that he had out of each wheel. The investigation proceeds further following the chain of events. They realize that Daniel, in his beeline rush toward Gare De Lyon, was told to pass by another station, a station that he would usually stop at, his chance to stop the situation before things would get worse. But this was an opportunity Saloon left at the door. However, there still should have been hope, because of a handy preset switch made in the morning. This switch would have diverted Daniel's train to a completely different platform, and thus keeping the situation far from happening, and far from being gruesome. But we must rewind to understand why this didn't occur, and why Daniel's train barreled into Andres. Remember when Daniel was panicking, and how he hit the emergency alarm button?
But before doing so, Daniel pushes the radio alarm, sending a signal to the control room to stop all trains within the vicinity.
Well, that does more than alert the control room and tell them to stop all trains in the vicinity. It also locks all the points in place, meaning that the points set to change actually just sat there stationary, granting Daniel and his rumbling and tumbling out of control train into Andres. Even if Daniel had given his train's information, one crucial aspect that he forgot to give, this likely could have turned out very differently, and Daniel's train still might have been able to be diverted somehow, and this whole situation might not have happened. But it did. After a while of searching for the anonymous passenger, it was reported that the individual was a mother who was concerned that she would be late to pick up her son. Driver Daniel Saloon is jailed for 36 months. Whilst it is likely that many have moved on, history shall not forget what happened on that fateful summer night in France.
Well, that's all for the first showing of Before You. We hope you enjoyed it. We shall now be signing off for the night. Thank you ever so much for tuning in tonight. This is the Gold Strike Network, signing off. Have a good night.